The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent 6. Stipulations and Silver Sage. The inn's dining room was warm and inviting, with the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. Golden morning sunlight streamed through the lace-trimmed curtains, casting soft patterns on the polished wooden floor. Evie sat at a corner table, nursing her cup of tea and trying to shake the nervous knot in her stomach. Spinks lounged on the chair beside her, his eyes lazily following the innkeeper as she refilled a guest's coffee. "You sure know how to make yourself at home," Evie murmured to the cat, scratching behind his ears. His low purr was soothing, though it did little to ease her growing anxiety. A sharp rap on the doorframe drew her attention. Marcellus Simoneau, dressed impeccably in a navy suit and tie, entered with a warm smile. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than her and exuded an air of quiet authority. "Good morning, Miss Hutchison. Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, pulling out the chair opposite her. Evie waved him to sit. "Not at all. Just me and Spinks here, trying to process, well, everything." Marcellus chuckled. "I imagine it's been quite the whirlwind for you. Shall we dive in?" He opened his briefcase, retrieving several crisp documents and placing them on the table. As he explained the details of the will, Evie felt a weight settle on her shoulders. She'd known there were stipulations to the inheritance, but hearing them spelled out in Marcellus's calm, measured voice made it all feel real. "To inherit the entirety of your great-aunt Lizzie's estate, you must meet a few key conditions," he began. "Firstly, you're required to reside at her house in Stony Fork. Secondly, you must assume ownership and management of her business, Silver Sage Naturals. And lastly, you may not sell the property or the business. They must remain in the family." He paused, giving her a moment to absorb the information. "And if I don't agree?" she asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Then the estate, including the shop and house, will be liquidated, with the proceeds donated to several charities of her choosing. However, there is a 1-year and 1-day grace period after you decline, just in case you change your mind." Evie let out a slow breath, staring at the fine print of the documents in front of her. The idea of living in Stony Fork wasn't unpleasant. The town had a certain charm that was hard to resist, but the responsibility of running a shop? No option to sell and keep the money if she changed her mind? That was a whole different story. "I've never managed a business," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "I wouldn't even know where to start." "That's what I'm here for," Marcellus said with a reassuring smile. "I'll handle the financial side and provide guidance as needed. And Silver Sage has a loyal customer base. Lizzie built something special there. You won't be starting from scratch." Spinks let out a low chirp, as if in agreement, and Marcellus chuckled. "Even your cat seems to think it's a good idea." Evie smiled faintly. "He's bossy like that." She leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the quiet street beyond. "I don't know. It's a lot to take in." "There's no rush," Marcellus said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Take some time to explore the shop, see what Lizzie built. It might help you decide." Evie nodded, grateful for the chance to gather her thoughts. "I think I'll do that." The shop was nestled in a charming plaza near the river, its bay windows framed by flower boxes overflowing with marigolds and lavender. The hand-painted sign above the door reads Silver Sage Naturals and Books in a curling script, with tiny illustrations of herbs twining around the letters. Spinks leaped out of the car and stretched lazily on the sidewalk as Evie hesitated in front of the door. There was an odd energy about the place, something both inviting and charged. Shaking off the feeling, she turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open. The scent of dried herbs and beeswax candles enveloped her instantly, warm and earthy. Sunlight filtered through the front windows, casting dappled patterns across rows of shelves lined with apothecary jars, hand-labeled with neat, careful writing. Lavender, chamomile, valerian root, rose petals. "It's beautiful," she murmured, running her fingers along the edge of a wooden display table. Spinks patted ahead, his tail flicking as he sniffed at the air. His ears twitched, and he let out a low meow, staring intently toward the back of the shop. "What is it, Spinksy?" Evie followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. Still, the air felt different, heavy almost. She shook her head. "It's just an old shop, nothing to worry about." As she wandered the space, something caught her eye, a slip of paper tucked under a stack of books on the counter. Curious, she pulled it free. The edges were creased, and the ink had smudged slightly, but the words were clear. Miss Hutchison, your refusal to sell the property is deeply disappointing. We could have come to a mutually beneficial agreement. Please reconsider my offer before more drastic measures become necessary. Hugo Bates. Evie frowned, reading the note again. She didn't know this Hugo Bates, but the tone of the letter made her uneasy. Who writes drastic measures in a business offer? Was this just harmless frustration? Or something more? A soft creak behind her interrupted her thoughts. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, but the shop was empty. Spinks sat near the door to the back room, his fur puffed slightly. He stared at something just out of sight, his body tense. Spinks? Evie whispered, taking a step closer. Her own pulse quickened as she reached for the doorknob. But when she opened it, there was nothing but a narrow hallway leading to a storeroom and stairs to the upstairs apartment. The feeling of being watched lingered, though, prickling at the back of her neck. She turned back to the main shop, determined to shake off the unease. All right, Lizzie, she muttered to herself. What on earth were you mixed up in? By the time she locked up the shop, her head was spinning. The note from Hugo, the strange energy in the shop, and the overwhelming task of deciding her future. It was all too much. She sat on a bench outside, Spinks curling up beside her, and stared at the river glinting in the afternoon sun. Stony Fork felt like a world away from everything she'd known, yet it tugged at her in a way she couldn't quite explain. Evie sighed, stroking Spinks's fur as she glanced back at the shop. What do you think, buddy? Should we stay? Or run while we still can? Spinks purred softly, his golden eyes half closed. For once, he didn't offer an opinion.